Thank you, Rupert, Andrew, Stephen, and for that very insightful conversation. Now I'd like to call Wojciech Popławski, Managing Director of Accenture Operations and VP of ABSL, and Elias van Herwaarden, Director of Global Location Strategy for Deloitte, to the stage to talk about and to share with you the results of the new ABSL Deloitte report on business services in Europe. Gentlemen, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Thomas. So, it's actually quite difficult to start or jump directly to the report after all these introductions, and actually very interesting perspective that just after the referendum was concluded, there was a lot of speculations across all the media around the world around how many jobs will actually move outside of the city. But if I look at this agenda, I actually read Timothy Ross, Brexit reporter, and I read Simon Kennedy, chief Brexit editor, and actually I think it's a quite positive start because before the procedure was launched, some jobs are being created. Yeah? I'm not even trying to speculate how many jobs will be created after the morning announcements, but maybe staying in a context of the jobs more on a European level. I wanted to introduce officially, for the first time, this European Business Services Destination Report published by ABSL in cooperation with Deloitte and our other distinguished partners like Hayes and JAL. And the most important aspect about this report, just to set the expectations at the beginning, this is not supposed to be the investment guide. I believe that this is a first quite objective attempt to take a look at the business services locations across Europe, not only Central Europe, what we did last year on the similar event in New York, but with these initiatives, we really wanted to give the perspective and create the opportunity to the audience and to all the stakeholders to actually build their own understanding and find the context what is actually different between these locations. Is there any specialization that evolved over the years? And maybe there is something actually which is a kind of an eye-opener for the new investments going forward. And the most important in this context is to understand the evolution of, maybe not revolution, maybe evolution, of business services sector in Europe and maybe even across the globe over the last 25 years. And as you may know, the big offshoring waves started 25 years ago with a big shift of the jobs to the offshore locations to India. And maybe around 10 years later, the nearshore concept started getting a lot of importance, especially in the context of creating and maybe taking the advantage of the proximity of the nearshore countries to the Western world, and evolving into gradually into the front office, back office models. And if you look at the landscape today, we may say that there is a very little difference between what we used to call onshore, which is more on the west side of the Europe, and what we call nearshore. Because if you even look at this report, there is a very specific specialization, but also in terms of capabilities, the nearshore is no longer just the transactional Europe, right? It's really becoming more important. There is a more investment, serious investment, especially in Central Europe, that are going beyond the transaction. And I think that the region, and not only Central Europe, but I think the onshore, nearshore concept of business services will be much more evolving into the direction of command centers and organizations that will be true advisors to the global leaders of the big corporations. So that's definitely our aspiration as an industry, as a sector. And of course, it's very important to share with you a little bit more details around what the location selection process is about and what methodology we used. That's why I would like to hand over to my distinguished colleague, Elias. Thanks a lot for your patience.
Thank you very much, Wojciech. Yeah, he always avoids using my last name. It's terribly Dutch. It's van Herwaarden, so everybody just calls me Elias. You escaped it once again. Good for you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here because in my normal daily life, I have the privilege of leading a group of people called Deloitte's Global Location Strategies. They help companies locate plants, headquarters, distribution centers, data centers. So why am I here? Because actually over these last 9 years, this team of Deloitte specialists has located over 90 business services centers all around the world, and particularly in Central Europe, because there was a lot of nearshoring, which you correctly referred to. And so that led ABSL to call on us for this report. They said, well, you do it all the time with real companies. What would be a methodology to develop a kind of lay of the land for Europe? And so that is what we did. Now, I'll talk about that methodology in a couple of minutes. But let me give you some real practice-based advice. What is happening out there? It is process drives location. What you want to do determines where you're going to do it. If you have very complex business services, you're not going to do it in a town at the end of a dead-end street. You will locate it in a city with a very good and strong, mature ecosystem. On the other hand, if what you do is very much script-based and doesn't require a lot of language capabilities, indeed, why not send it to India? So process drives location. Another important thing is that companies just don't only look at that question, they look at around 65 different location criteria. And these criteria are very much specific to the processes, but also to the companies themselves. Some companies are very risk-aversive. They will only go to mature cities. Others are risk-seeking. Clear example, A.P. Møller-Mærsk. When the tanks were rolling onto Tiananmen Square, they located their business services in Shenzhen, in the People's Republic of China. So different types of appetite of risk come into play as well. I think also an important lesson from the trenches is that countries do not exist. Is that true? Well, from a location perspective for business services, yes. There's much more resemblance between Warsaw, Prague and Budapest than there would be between Warsaw and a secondary city like Poznan, just to take a Polish example. I think it's also very important to note that it's not only about the location criteria, it's also about cost. And we have seen in business services over the last 20 years, it started with low costs, but today we see a trend where companies are looking for value creation at the same level of importance as achieving cost. So against all that, what has happened in these last 15 years, according to FDI intelligence, companies have set up business services in over 130 cities in Europe alone. Now, Wojciech and I, and especially ABSL, guided us, we would not cover those cities. So what did we do? We went to a database, partly of Deloitte, partly of Hayes, and also of FDI Intelligence, a Financial Times service, as you might know, and we looked at the EU countries and the border countries, like Turkey, like Egypt. And we said, how are we going to select? We looked at those countries that had witnessed the largest job creation. Okay, that gave us 10. In each country, we then said, well, which cities have created most jobs in the last 10 years and have seen an acceleration that was very important in the last 5 years? Well, that gave us a list of cities, ladies and gentlemen, and sometimes it's not the capital city. So we tried to group the developments outside of these 2 cities per country in a small preface. So did we talk about 65 location criteria? Of course not. That would have been writing War and Peace. We focused on stuff like the cluster, how many companies, how many people are employed on a country level. We focused on labor code. Hayes Talent Solution did an outstanding job in profiling the talent pools, in developing the wage costs. Jones Lang LaSalle, JLL I should call them today, I'm too old for this stuff, did a great job on mapping out what it is like in terms of real estate availability and real estate costs. And finally, we tried to add a cherry on the cake by providing some perspective. So that is the booklet that you will find on your chairs. And again, like Wojciech said, it's not all encompassing. In fact, it is a journey. It shows Europe at its best. And why are we doing this? Why we're doing this as partners of ABSL? There's around 1 million to 1.5 million people working in the sector in Europe today. We think we have a big potential. It's not about India. It's certainly not about Asia Pac.
It's a growing sector that's employing a lot of people. And this is like a kind of a, not a roadmap, it's some guidelines for your journey. I thank you for your attention and enjoy reading it.